So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which means that it is the molecule that allows the electrical signal from the presynaptic neuron to be communicated to the postsynaptic neuron, because there's a little gap called the synapse between those two neurons. So neurotransmitters allow fine-tuning of those electrical signals. And dopamine is the most important neurotransmitter involved in motivation and reward. And the fundamental difference between things that are addictive and those that aren't is that things that are addictive release a lot more dopamine. So we have dopamine firing in our brain that occurs at a tonic baseline. And when we do something that's rewarding or pleasurable, we get a little rise in dopamine levels or a spike. So for example, chocolate increases dopamine levels about 50% above baseline. Sex is about 100%. Nicotine is about 150%. And things like methamphetamines are 1,000%. Mm-hmm. Partially because of their specific mechanism. But the fundamental way that I explain to patients and medical students, and now in my book, about the neuroscience of addiction so that they can really understand what's happening in the brain, is I say that really you have to imagine that in your brain there's a balance, like a teeter-totter in a playground. When we experience pleasure, the balance tips one way. When we experience pain, it tips the other. But one of the fundamental rules governing that balance is that it wants to remain level. So with any deviation from neutrality, the brain will work very hard to restore a level balance, or what's called homeostasis. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I do something pleasurable, like eat a piece of chocolate, I get a little tip to the side of pleasure, a little release of dopamine. But no sooner has that happened than my brain adapts to that phenomenon by downregulating my own dopamine receptors, downregulating my own dopamine transmission. And I imagine that is these little gremlins hopping on the pain side of the balance to bring it level again. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But the thing about the gremlins is they like it on the balance, so they stay on until the balance is tipped an equal and opposite amount to the side of pain. And that's called the opponent process reaction, the hangover, the come down, the after effect. Now, and in my case, that's that moment of wanting another piece of chocolate. If I wait long enough, the gremlin hops off and balance is restored. But if I continue to consume chocolate in ever larger amounts to overcome the tolerance or the number of gremlins on the pain side, then I end up with enough gremlins on the pain side of my balance to fill this whole room. And I'm essentially in a dopamine deficit state with a balance tilted to the side of pain. Now I have to keep using, not to feel good, but just to feel normal. And when I stop using, my balance tips hard to the side of pain. I'm irritable, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I can't sleep. Those are the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance. And that can last a long time. We live in a world in which we are saturated with dopamine, and we live in a culture which encourages us to pursue it. But the ultimate end result of pursuing dopamine is to feel worse than when you started. And this is really the central message. People are more depressed, more anxious, more suicidal, and more addicted than they were 30 years ago. And I contend that one of the main reasons is because of this relentless pursuit of pleasure that essentially adjusts the dopamine levels, changes the hedonic or pleasure set point to make people anhedonic, meaning without joy.
These addictive behaviors, substances are ubiquitous. It used to just be, hard drugs and alcohol and cigarettes, et cetera. But now it's literally everything from, the billboards and the advertisements and the marketing messages crafted by Madison Avenue to, of course, the devices that we all carry around with us that are specifically designed to lure us into this, dopamine-induced state, and the food system that's specifically designing foods with the right proportion of salt, sugar, and fat to make it impossible to just eat one potato chip.
Yes, exactly. I mean, addiction can happen now in every realm of life. It's almost impossible to escape it. And the three factors that make anything more addictive are quantity, potency, and novelty. And what our capitalist, technologically innovative world has created is an infinite quantity, incredible potency, and endless novelty and variety.
Yeah. and ubiquitous availability.
Yes,
right.
And
it's
the smartphone.
unavoidable.
Yes, right.
Now.
And now it's 24/7 and it's digital and it's right to your doorstep. Exactly.